Hi everybody, today we're going to explore the Morph tool in PowerPoint. Morph tool is an interesting way that you can convert one shape to another shape on the screen and it will transition seamlessly. So look at an example of this. We have here a blue rectangle, and on another slide we have a red circle. And you can see that the transition morphs from one to another. So we're going to duplicate this on a new PowerPoint slide. So I'm going to go ahead and insert. I'm going to insert shapes. We'll start with that blue rectangle. You can shape this to anything that you want. And I am going to duplicate that. And I'm going to go ahead and change the shape so that it is something different. In this case, let's make that a red circle. I'm going to make the height and the width the same so that it's a perfect circle. And I'll go ahead and center that. And let's change the size and the color. So maybe I'll make it a bit smaller and I'll make it red. Now I'm going to duplicate this again. You can press Ctrl D or right click and duplicate the slide. And I'm going to change this to a different shape. The shape we used was something like a sun, a star. Let's make an 8-point star. And I'll make that orange, and I can change how do I want this star. Maybe we'll make it a little more dramatic, and I'll make it larger. Now the trick is for the Morph tool that these shapes have unique names. So on the Home tab, I'm going to click on the selection pane, and I can see that this is named Rectangle 4 and Oval 4. I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to rename it. I'm going to have 2 exclamation points, and you can rename it whatever you want. Exclamation points, and then I'll name it shape. I'm going to copy that, and then I will go ahead and name this shape as well. Alright, and now I'm going to go to the Transitions tab. Instead of having a fade or a push or one of the normal transitions, I'm going to apply the Morph transition, and I can see a preview of what that will look like. I'll go to this slide here as well and have a Morph transition there. So let's preview this and see what it looks like. Here we have transition 1 and transition 2. I can also have these transitions so that right now they advance on the mouse slide. Suppose I want it to change shape, and I can determine how long do I want the transition to be. I think 2 seconds was good, and then I want it to advance the slide to the next shape after 0 seconds. Now I can go back and modify the shape. There you go, something pretty seamless. I'm going to create a new slide now. Let's put an icon on the slide. I'm going to search for a couple icons actually, and we'll morph between one icon and another icon. So how about this aperture and perhaps this wave. I'm going to make these bigger, and let me do some formatting for both of these. Maybe I'll make these green with black outline. I'm going to duplicate the slide. And so now I want it to morph from one to another. And let me, just for fun, I am going to make this one smaller, and I'll make this one larger and over to the right. So let's see how we can morph between these two. Now if I were to play this just as it is, there's no transition, and so it would jump from one to another. And if I apply the morph transition without having named the items, then it'll fade one out. Oops, I need to apply the morph to slide 5. So it's going to fade one out and fade one in, but I want it to morph from one to the other. So we're going to click on this. This is called graphic, so let me just put 2 exclamation marks, call it graphic. I'm going to copy that and paste it to this one, so now it's called the same thing. And now we'll see the transition. So now you can see it becoming the other icon. So you can morph between shapes, between icons. One last thing that we'll look at is how to morph between pictures. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a picture from stock photography, and let's look for 2 pictures that seem good. So here's a golfer and here's a cat. We'll put those 2 images on here. Now I'm going to save some time now. I showed you about the 2 exclamation points. I'm actually going to name both of these picture, and then I will duplicate the slide, and I'll delete the cat from the one. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and just so that I can make sure that this is full screen. I want this to be the full screen. One trick that I like to crop the picture so that it fits right onto the canvas, and then I can move the picture around slightly All right, so now it's cropped on there. I'm going to do the same for this. I'm going to bump this up, and then I'll go ahead and crop it to fit the dimension of the slide. And I think that's good. All right, so let's have it morph from the golfer to the cat. And I see that I've named the pictures. They're the exact same name. So when I click on the morph transition, it should morph from one to the other. So let's look at what that looks like. All right, so I can easily morph from one to the other. Last trick that we'll look at is how to pan and zoom. So now I have this picture of the cat, and it's going to morph into this other cat, but notice if I go ahead and crop it and then drag it out, and I make this much larger, maybe I'll put this larger, and then I'll put a text box on the screen that says cat. And let me play around with that. I'm going to maybe change the font, make it even bigger. The font color, I want to take the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to search for a color. Oops. I'm going to search for a color on the cat. Eyedropper, I'm going to have the color be light, like over here. And maybe put a drop shadow as well. We'll just see what that looks like. So we morph from one picture to another picture, and then with this picture, we're going to pan in and have an animation appear on screen. It actually looks good. It looks like Sesame Street right here. C is for cat. So let's go back to the beginning and look at all that we've done. We have 8 slides, one morphing into the other. So we got our shapes, and then we have our icons morphing from one to the other. Now we have a picture that morphs into another picture, and then this picture that morphs by panning and zooming, and then we have some on-screen elements. So that is the basics of PowerPoint Morph tool.